Welcome to the Cannabis Review. We've got an absolutely amazing episode for you today. Somebody I've been looking forward to having on the show for a very long time. One of the OG players of the game, internationally known and locally respected. This Mr. Tim Blake, the founder of the Emerald Cup. Tim, how are you keeping?
Wonderful. Glad to be here. Honored.
Excellent, excellent. I think the easiest thing to do, there's going to be a lot of viewers who know exactly who you are and what you do, but for those who don't, can you give a little bit of background in the cannabis industry and how long you've been around and the creation of the Emerald Cup?
Well, I started dealing cannabis when I was 14 back in 1973. So our brand says that we're the longest running cannabis brand in the country at 47 years. I got into developing an event called the Emerald Cup, which was the longest running sun-grown organic cannabis competition in the world 17 years ago. It started out as just a flowers competition. It's evolved into over 40 contests and almost 200 awards. We have every imaginable contest from edibles, topicals, tinctures, salves, CBD, flowers, concentrates, about 30,000 people. We had 700 entries last year, a little over. In the past, we've had over 1,000, which is 3 or 4 times larger than High Times or any other event. So I'm really proud of that. We really focus on organic, sustainable farming, and we're up to regenerative farming now, teaching people how to do that. And everything at the show that you come to, all the food is organic. Everybody is organic, and I'm really proud of that. We started out that way 17 years ago, and we're still there. So it's an amazing evolution to see, and I've also helped, we've sponsored the first sheriff's debates and the district attorney debates where law enforcement got together with cannabis farmers in Mendocino County about 14 years ago and helped the sheriff get elected. And that was the first place in the country that actually law enforcement and district attorney and government officials got together. So I've also helped spearhead the legalization effort. So it's been quite a ride.
Okay, so yeah, as I said, an OG player of the game and somebody who's been around since the very start of the industry. Can you tell the audience then a little bit about what is the Emerald Triangle, the specific territory in California?
The Emerald Triangle. Sorry about that sun. The sun is wafting through my window right now on that side.
Yeah, good.
I wasn't planning on the sun coming at 8 in the morning, but the Emerald Triangle came about it's 3 counties in Northern California, Trinity, Humboldt, and Mendocino. I grew up in the industry in the 70s where it was basically all Thai and hash and South American, Mexican, and Colombian being brought into California for people to smoke and take imbibes. And what happened was that in the mid 80s, law enforcement came up with, there was some small outdoor farming in Northern California, but in the early 80s, they came up with the private prison system and the minimum mandatory jailing. And so it basically wiped out the international trade of cannabis coming into California. I had some people come and show me some of the finest cannabis I've ever seen. They said, we're going to be all growing under lights that you see like in Safeway grocery stores in 2 years. And I said, what do you mean? I had 5,000 pounds of Thai in my backyard. And they said, yeah, they're going to bust all the loads coming into California in the next 2 years. And everybody's going to be forced to grow indoor and grow up in the mountains. And I laughed at him. I bought all his weed. It was the best weed I'd ever seen. 2 years later, I had to go back and get that strain and start growing indoors because they wiped out every load that came in. And people that were getting 6-month jail sentences were then all of a sudden getting 10 to 20 years, and they completely wiped out the industry. And so what happened was it forced, and leave it to cannabis people, the ingenuity. We moved up to Northern California, and all the back-to-landers just started blowing up all the indoor and all the outdoor farms up there. And that became known as the Emerald Triangle because it was supplying all the cannabis to the rest of California and basically the whole country. We were the 95%, just the supplier of all that cannabis. And it's also got, high mountains. So you got warm days, cold nights. It's really good for flowers. It's kind of like, Afghan or the Himalayas or whatnot in a lot of ways. So for a variety of reasons, the Emerald Triangle became known as the real supplier of cannabis around the country and around the world.
Yeah, well, I think that anybody in the industry would be aware of that. I read recently that there was a California law passed to protect certain territories of cannabis growers, something like Chardonnay and Champagne for the wine industry over in California. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, they put together an appellations bill so that we could basically designate our cannabis to be grown from certain areas and farmed from certain areas. And the reason why that is because California is a massive agricultural area. And now that we've legalized it, you have massive farming taking place in the southern part of the state, down towards LA and in the Central Valley and even out in the San Joaquin Valley. And so you've got these farms that are becoming 10, 20, 50 acre farms of cannabis. So the $2 chuck lower end of the market is being chewed up. The farmers and small craft makers up in the Emerald Triangle can't compete with those massive farms. And so the only way that we can actually save ourselves as a niche is to get ourselves that appellation so that we can designate our farms and our craft cannabis coming from those areas, so that the high-end farmers can actually have a branding method for them so that they can hold on. In France, it was a little different because they weren't competing. It was just still the designation into those areas so they could really be the highest crafted. Although now it is. Look at how much wine is being grown around the world and farmed. And so those appellations are really good for France to be in there. But the small farmers up here in Mendocino and Humboldt and Trinity have had a very tough time with legalization. You're probably going to see 75% of those farmers not make the transition into the legal market. One of the things that happened was that an infamous man named Ed Rosenthal, who's written several books, he's a legendary cannabis guy. We almost got in a fight on stage at an event 10 years ago, arguing about the fact that he was saying that when it all went legal, the Emerald Triangle was going to have a very difficult time. And I argued with him. I had to go back and apologize to Ed and admit that he was right, because up here in the Emerald Triangle, you don't have access to the cheap labor. You don't have access to the manufacturing plants and the spacing, the production. It's really tough, a lot of steep land. It's not traditional farming. If it wasn't for the illegality of it, you wouldn't have come up into these mountains and grown cannabis at large scale methods. And so it's really not made for us to compete on that level. And so most of these small craft farmers are not going to make that transition over the next couple of years. And they're already really taking a really hard hit ever since legalization. I've gotten a lot of flack for that because I really was vocal about legalization. But at the same time, you're not seeing people do long prison sentences anymore. You're not seeing people have tough access to cannabis. And people like my Irish Catholic, priest uncle, who's the longest reigning Catholic priest in the Bay Area, is now using cannabis for his Parkinson's disease, CBD, and he's smoking cartridges and doing dances on video because it's legal now. And my brother-in-law was captain of Watsonville PD and was a drug enforcement cop who has serious issues with cancer, is now using cannabis for a lot of his illnesses. So it broke down the stigma of not being okay with using cannabis. It's keeping people from going to jail, and it's giving consumers really massive, cheaper access to products. So it's good in the long run, tough for the Emerald Triangle.
Yeah, I understand. So that transition for some of the outlaw growers into a certified corporation might be a tough task for those who might not have already had business acumen already. I could understand that. I'd like to move on to the next topic, the Emerald Cup. When did it start? How many people were at the first one?
Boy, the first one started 17 years ago. We disguised it as a birthday party because back then people were still going to lengthy prison sentences. People thought I was crazy and I'd be arrested the first time. I have a small event center and campground called Area 101 right on the highway in the heart of the Emerald Triangle. And we just went ahead and did it, disguised as that birthday party. We had a couple dozen entries, a couple hundred people showed up. A lot of the people were wearing masks. People were I'm sure there was undercover agents in the crowd, and we didn't get arrested. We pulled that off. An 86-year-old man whose son had given him a purple kush won the first contest. He'd never grown cannabis. He was a traditional farmer, and he said, "I'm going to be dead soon, so you might as well keep the award." So we actually have the first winning award still at my place at Area 101. And boy, that was just a flowers competition at the time. Over the next couple of years, it got bigger and bigger. And we moved to Humboldt at one point about 8 or 9 years ago. And then we moved to down south to the Sonoma County Fairgrounds and really went from it being 1,000 to 2,000 people up to 10, 20, 30,000 people. And up from 50, 100 entries to where we got up to 700 to 1,000, 1,200 entries of different varieties and strains. And like I was telling you earlier, Now it's gone from a flowers contest to where we have over 40 competitions, almost 200 awards. We have 100+ judges. It's a massive intake from all over California. And if you look at the size of California, it's like a country in itself. We take in entries from all over the state. We have to pick that up everywhere. It's a very massive logistical project to get that material, get it to our judges, judge all that material, and get that all done, and then come to the cup. By the time we're done, my daughter, who's my co-producer, Taylor, and I, and the crew are exhausted. We're pretty much worn out from putting on this event by the end of the year.
And tell me this, in the 17 years, was there one major year where there was a transition in technology where you saw a massive difference in the genetics or the massive difference in, let's say, the quality of the product? Is there any specific year that stands out, or was it a gradual kind of incline of new technology came along and year by year was just a little bit better? Or do you remember one year being like, holy shit, this is really, really good stuff?
Well, what I really liked when we moved to Sonoma County about 7 years ago, what I really liked at one point was pretty much a lot of indoor, because you couldn't grow outdoors until we got permission to grow outdoors legally. So when we got our sheriff elected, there was a big transition because we created the 9.31 program where you could grow legally up to 99 plants outdoor in the full sun. Up till then, you had to grow under the trees. And so you didn't have a very good flower because you weren't getting full sun and you were under the trees. Once we could transition into growing full sun outdoor, then people realized, wow, the sun-grown cannabis can compete with indoor. Up till that point, everybody thought it was just indoor, and sun-grown was a B-grade product, but that's because it wasn't getting full sun. Once we transitioned into that, and all the counties started allowing you to grow outdoors in the full sun, then it became a huge transition in the marketplace. That was one issue. The second issue was, up until then, a lot of people were only doing the fuels, which were the OG, the diesel, the headband, the chem dogs. At one point I thought, gosh, all we're ever going to see are these strains, because that was what was demanded in the marketplace. And then we had a transition where people really realized that this combination of flavors of the purples and the citruses, the gelatos and the cakes, the Girl Scout cookies. It started with Girl Scout cookies, came in, and people realized, wow, they wanted to get really high off the OGs and the fuels, but they wanted to have those flavors that you saw in all the other strains. And so then a massive amount of genetic breeding started taking place. Now, at one point, if you had over 100 seeds, you could go to jail for 10 years. So they really kept the market and the genetic evolution down by making it very, very challenging to grow and breed genetics, because you went to prison for so long. Once it started getting towards legalization and you could have as many seeds as you wanted, then people could really start breeding the genetics. And that's what we've done over the last 10, 12 years. Is you've seen California take the forefront in genetic breeding across the world. It used to be that it was all in Amsterdam and going down into Spain. And now all those guys from Europe come over to California and get all their seeds, because we've just taken the lead in all the genetic breeding. And now you see all these varieties, all the cakes, the lava cakes, wedding cakes, all the gelatos that have come in, you know. And so now it's actually interesting. It's harder to sell a straight OG Kush in the dispensaries and off your farms than it is the Purple Punch. And people thought forever that, you know, you couldn't sell those strains. And now it's easier to sell a Purple Punch than it is an OG. So really being able to grow full sun, and then the genetic breeding really changed that. And then really towards the legalization, you had people doing like edibles in their houses. There was no ratios. People were getting OD'd. Nobody was going on. Once we got close to that legalization, all of a sudden the brands could come in. And at the cup, you watched each year. I think last year we had over 150 cartridge brands in California for cartridges. Look. If you look at the edibles, you go look at the entry cases and see the quality of the branding and the edibles, the tinctures, the salves. It's world class. I mean, it's blown our minds. We moved to Sonoma 7 years ago. It was a small, you know, it was only about 10,000 people, and we still were isolated in how many brands there were. Now, every year, it's phenomenal. It's overwhelming to keep up with all the brands and all the packaging and the quality of the thought going into that. And the marketing, like we said, the value of the marketing, how much money. It's become a big business.
Yeah, no, that's it. Like any industry, it's become mainstream now, so the money goes in with it. Kind of leads me on to our last topic. I've always wanted to know, what's your favorite ever strain? What's the nicest strain that you've ever personally tried? And yeah, I've just been curious about this one.
I'm a fuel head. I really like strong cannabis, so I've always loved the OG, the very best of it. But there's a strain that won the cup, came in top 10 about 5 times. It was called the Sugaree, and it's not very well known right now. But I had a friend who was a cancer patient. He didn't like the fuels. He wanted something that was a little bit less knockout and more uplifting, a little bit more of the sativa cross. And he crossed a KC36 with a skunk and came up with the Sugaree strain. And it's a very unique strain that combines the real punch with the real sweet flavor. And so I like that. But I'll tell you what, there's so many great strains and flavors out there now. It's overwhelming. Every year there's 100, 200 more. And you can't even keep up trying them all. But, I'm an old OG guy, but I really like that Sugaree back in the day.
Okay, amazing. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. And I do have to offer my services if you ever need an Irish judge for any of your competitions to sample any of the products. I'd like to put my hand up for that.
You know what? We do applications now for judges because we want to include more people. We had over 400 applications this year for judges coming in.
I'm not surprised.
It was amazing to look at the quality of these judges that wanted to come in. Our judges never want to leave once they're in there, and we've had to start kicking off judges so we can bring in some of these new people to come in. And we've gone from the Emerald Triangle to Northern California to the whole state. So now we're bringing in judges from all across the state to really balance that. As we go legal and we go interstate, we want to start having judges from all over the country and all over the world. So we'll put you down as the first European.
Yeah, that's exactly what I like to hear.
We do like to see different people's tastes. It's really nice to see that because at one point we had a lot of the Neanderthal, Northern California, primarily men. I mean, this was a male-dominated industry because people went to jail for 10 to 20 years. So there weren't very many females involved. It was really male-dominated. And so that was kind of the judging. Now we've come in and we have a lot more females involved. We have a lot more diversity from across the state, a lot more different types of desires and flavors. And so it's nice to see the judges go back and forth on what they like and what the characteristics are.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Excellent. This has been a hugely informative discussion. I'd love to definitely get you on in the new year. Hopefully we have some regulations that are passed over in Europe and things start to move on a little bit more swiftly, and we'd be able to get your take on things in 2021. I can't thank you enough for coming on, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You know what? I was the only one that would go out and do interviews back about 15 years ago, just like with the Emerald Cup. I was kind of crazy. My family are lawyers and cops and priests. And so I was like, we've got to break this down. So at one point, I did a massive amount of interviews because nobody else would do it. Now everybody wants their 15 minutes worth of fame. So everybody's interviewing all over the world. But the most important thing I've said is people like you, it's the educators and the people doing programming and writing in magazines that have broken down that stigma and really opened up cannabis. And the work that you do in Ireland, the people that work throughout Europe, the people that work throughout, they're the ones that really made this work. So I know people don't get paid a lot being writers or doing media and stuff. And I've always appreciated and I've always acknowledged what they've done because it's you guys that have really made cannabis be able to go worldwide the way it is right now.
Well, absolutely perfect way to sign off the show. An absolute gentleman. Thank you very much, Tim, and we'll chat to you again in the future.
You got it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.